to welcome you all and thank you all for coming. There was some concern by the Star about whether we would have a robust debate this year, and I hope this will be robust, but hopefully nobody throws microphones at anybody else or does anything untoward like that. I'd like first, by the way, let me just mention that on your chairs are programs, and we very much want your questions. And the last page of the brochure is a form for questions. And Lauren over here will be passing through and picking up your questions and then collecting them all throughout the entire afternoon and handing them to the three question vetterers here who will try to work them into a logical format for our debate. We have some questions that members of the GGG have already sent in response to a request that we made when we did mass mailings of our invitation to the event. But before we get too far involved, I'd like Steve Schwartz to give you a little bit of background about the GGG and what we're all about for those of you who don't know us.
Hello. The GGG was started 11 years ago by a group of concerned citizens. It's strictly nonpartisan, made up of Republicans, Democrats, socialists, conservatives, you name it. And our mission was to increase voter participation and the information that was available for the citizens of the town to make intelligent decisions. We were also concerned about the lack of respect and sort of ill manners that were prevailing at that time in public discourse. And we felt that it was vitally important for everyone to respect each other and to listen and learn from each other. Everyone can learn. And so we started the GGG, and we've had quite a number of these kind of debates, and we're very grateful for the participation of our elected officials and the candidates that are running against them. And we hope that you'll pay attention, treat each other with respect, and come away from here having learned something. Thank you. I'm also going to pass around a sign-up sheet for any of you that may not have already seen them. And if you'd like to be on our email list or to be involved in any of our programs, I encourage you to sign up. Thank you.
Okay. With regard to voting, which is the ultimate aim of this program, for those of you who are not going to be in East Hampton, we have a supply from the library of applications for absentee ballots on the table at the rear, both in English and Spanish. And we also note on the brochure that for the first time, there's going to be early voting in the town of East Hampton, and there's a little list on page 4 which shows you where it is, when you can do that. Our format is relatively simple. We've used it many times that most of you know. We have a minute for each of the candidates to describe themselves and what their interests are and what they think they could add to the town. We then have one question asked, and then it's answered by each of the candidates. And again, the 1 minute time limit, because we have 6 candidates who want to say something. Every candidate is very much encouraged to say, I agree, if they can, so we can move on to more questions. The questions will be vetted by our 3 fellows on the right, and we hope that we cover most of the areas that you want and have an interest in. We obviously can't always get to all the questions, and if you write them down, we will bundle the questions, scan them, and then send them to all the candidates, because that may help them understand what your concerns are during the coming election season and the coming year. We have, I think, all of our candidates ready. The first question is really simple. It's to tell you about each of themselves. And then we'll go on to, by the way, the written questions, copies of which are on page 3 of your brochure. And we're trying this, we've never done it before. We put together some relatively complicated questions and then gave those 3 to all of the candidates in advance so they can think about them. After that, we'll go to our usual format where nobody has seen the questions, and they're much shorter, I can promise you that. So without further ado, David.
I'm David Gruber. I'm the candidate for supervisor of the EH Fusion Party, which is a joint effort of Republicans, Democrats, Independents, just like the GGG, people from all parties working together across party lines, because we have become convinced that partisanship and one-party monopoly in East Hampton are getting in the way of solving our long-term problems. I'm a 33-year resident of East Hampton. I have 2 daughters. They are now young women at university, and I adopted each of them when they were a year old from China. I have degrees in physics, law, and a couple of degrees in advanced economics, plus 2 halves of an MBA from different universities. In my 30s, I was the acting CEO for 18 months of a manufacturing company that got into trouble, and I successfully saved that from ruin, and then saved or supervised companies in diverse businesses from animal feed to trucking to theaters to Time's Up. I solve problems. That's
Okay.
what I do.
Now, Peter, David solves problems. You've had some problems. Why don't you give us a bit of your background?
I am Peter Van Scoik, the town supervisor of East Hampton. For the last 8 years, I've been on the town board. And the last 2 years, I've worked every day to enhance this community as town supervisor. I've raised a family here, 2 children, Amy and Tom. I'm especially proud of both of them this week. My daughter Amy just passed her qualification exams at UC Berkeley. She has a National Science Foundation grant to finish her PhD at that institution. My son Tom just finished filming his first screenplay. My wife worked here in the East Hampton School District for over 25 years as band director, taught thousands of children the joys of learning to play instruments, and had very successful award-winning jazz band. I've owned and operated businesses in East Hampton for almost 25 years. In addition, I've served 5 years on the Zoning Board of Appeals, my last year as chair, and 6 years on the planning board. I'm intimately familiar with this community and the many problems. Arthur said, lots of problems. Yes, we have a lot of problems, and we've faced them head on. Thank you.
Betsy?
Thank you so much. First of all, I do want to thank you for holding this forum. I'm privileged to be here to speak to everyone today. As he said, Betsy Bambrick. I am an unaffiliated candidate for town board. I can be found on the conservative, independents, and libertarian ballot lines. And you might have noticed that that's quite an entire spectrum of political viewpoints. I'm also endorsed by East Hampton Republican Committee, EH Fusion Party, and Reformed Democrats. I have been a 30-year public servant working for the town of East Hampton, beginning in 1989 as the animal control supervisor and then the director of code enforcement. I have remained independent as an enforcer despite being encouraged to join major political parties, and I consider myself to be a member of Team East Hampton. I raised a son and a daughter here who I am immensely proud of. And I want to see that they can maybe put down roots of their own if they'd like to here and continue the community service that I've already established. Thank you. Hey, huh?
I'm sorry, David.
Yes, once again, I want to thank the GGG for having us here. I also want to thank the East Hampton Library, Dennis Faberzak. And I want to thank all of you for participating in democracy, for coming on a lovely Saturday afternoon. Hi, I'm East Hampton Town Councilman David Lease, and I'm running for re-election to the East Hampton Town Board. East Hampton is my home. It's my birthplace. My community, my family, and my roots are extremely important to me. My dad immigrated from Indonesia in the 1960s, and my mom was a 29-year school teacher of the East Hampton School District. My wife Rachel and I are married over 14 years. We live in Springs, and we have 4 lovely daughters who all attend our local schools. My wife and I also have businesses in Montauk and Amagansett and employ many of our neighbors. As a lifelong resident of East Hampton, as the last 21 years as your East Hampton Town Councilman, I have consistently demonstrated the ability to get things done and bring people together to make sure things get accomplished through doing research and through consensus building. I am proud of what I've done to help this community benefit. I look forward to doing even more. There are 3 priorities I want to work on. I know Peter and Sylvia are also important to these, is protecting our waters, ensuring affordable housing, and providing opportunities for our youth.
Okay, take a deep breath. So you used part of Betsy's time, so we're okay. We're still on schedule. Bonnie? Bonnie
Are we
Brady?
on? Oh, we are on. Okay. I'm going to try to whip through this in a minute, so let's see. Hi, my name is Bonnie Brady. I'm from Montauk, and I'm running for the town board. I first moved here in '89 from D.C. to help my mom care for my younger siblings post her divorce. I met my husband, Dave Arapach. He's a commercial fisherman in 1995, and we have 2 daughters in college. I was a 16-year member of the Montauk Fire Department. I wrote the Pilot County project, which brought the first automatic electronic defibrillators to the East End, to Montauk specifically. I was also elected for 3 years as the department secretary, the first paramedic, and additionally, I was the ambulance company training officer. I've also been a reporter for the Star, a Peace Corps health volunteer in a bush post in Cameroon, and helped create the East End Cares Group. My job specifically was obtaining and shuttling disaster relief supplies to the Rockaways post-Hurricane Sandy. I've been the executive director of the Long Island Commercial Fishing Association for the last 20 years. I'm running for office because I believe the town board has lost its way, has forgotten the words transparency, consistency, and consensus and respect when it comes to our communities. I believe we need all voices to be heard by the town government, not just those voices who agree with the status quo. If elected, I plan on representing all of you. Thank you.
Sylvia?
I'm going to say first, good afternoon, and thank you all for being here. Thank you to GGG for sponsoring this event, and for you guys to take time out of your busy schedule to hear what the candidates have to say, what our experiences are, and what our goals for the community is. For me, community is the thing that matters. I suspect that all of you here also care about community and believe in your community. And like you, I am grateful that East Hampton is mine. So why is community important? It's important because community is the shaper of things. It certainly shaped my family. The school teachers, our neighbors, our church, our friends, our organizations, co-workers, they all influenced and shaped our family. Our town council also plays a role in influencing and shaping as well. Its role is to bring people together, to lift them up, and along with my colleagues on the town board, we've been working towards those goals by addressing affordable housing, considering resiliency, expanding the number of citizens, committees, and inclusiveness, leading in energy sustainability, and planning the future, and so much more. Thank you.
I really want to commend this panel. This is the first time we've gotten through this and stayed on schedule, so you deserve a round of applause. We're now going to try what we haven't done before, which is the 3 written questions, which you can find and read along with us on page 3. And there's a big poster which the LTV people will focus on, so that the folks who see this on LTV can also better understand the question. They're complex questions, but hopefully we'll be able to get the gist of them and get some thoughtful answers from the candidates. The first question revolves around offshore wind energy, and I'll read it hopefully not too slowly. East Hampton residents have fought any deep water cable landing in Wainscott or on the state parklands in the Peak. Hundreds of wind turbines, not just 15, are eventually to be built 30 miles out from Montauk. A huge cable was proposed to take all of the energy output, including the first 15, to a large PSE&G substation near the old Shoreham site, where there are lots of facilities that can handle that kind of input. So that we can assume there will be no small cable landing in East Hampton, and probably, if not, no community benefits package for the town. However, fishermen are complaining about the cable affecting their catches, and with no funds set aside for compensation, they also fear that their complaints will be ignored by the large companies building the turbines. Also, the wind energy from the first 15 turbines will now be going up island and not starting in East Hampton to help us meet our 100% renewable energy goal. What would you do? David, we're going to start with you and then go through everybody. In 1 minute. No, we're going to give actually 6 minutes. 6 candidates.
The first thing to understand is that Arthur's question isn't really a hypothetical when he says the power from the first 15 turbines would not be going to East Hampton. That's the case now. Any notion that deepwater wind is going to provide power primarily or exclusively to East Hampton is a complete fiction. Electricity does not work that way. Once it's plugged into the grid, it's going to be consumed by everybody in the LIPA ratepayer base. We won't buy it, we won't pay for it, and we won't consume it, except for our 1.5%. The sad part of this story is that the incorrect belief that this is a major contribution to meeting our renewable energy goal is getting in the way of the one way where we really can meet it, and that's solar energy. It is the only technically possible way of meeting our goal, and we're not getting on with it. We had a plan 4 years ago at the start of one. It was put on the shelf when deepwater wind came up, and that is a shame. If we're serious, we have to get on with solar.
Peter?
Well, this really is a hypothetical question in many senses. What's not hypothetical at this point is the science behind climate change that's been well known and proven for many, many years. We're only now in a position where we're starting to do something about it. 15 wind turbines off Montauk would replace over 130 million pounds of coal being burned. And if you don't think that's significant in our environment right now, not only are we facing nitrogen loading from septic systems, but nitrogen from atmospheric deposition is around 40%. We're not going to be able to solve our energy problems with any one source. 14% is about the best we can do in East Hampton for solar. And by the way, I believe it's important to lead by example. I put solar on my roof over a year ago. I'm producing 130% of my electric needs for my family. I think it's important for every one of us to do something. We can't do everything, but everybody can do something. We're facing a crisis that affects our quality of life and our future.
Thank you, Pete. Betsy?
I love the question. I love the way it's phrased. I attended the press sessions last week on wind energy, and Fred Thiel was there, and he spoke of the legislation that he's enacting entitled Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. It's interesting to note that Legislator Thiel first supported this project, then he withdrew his support, and now he is writing law to make sure that we have leadership in this field and that the community is protected. I want to break that down into two main parts. With climate leadership, that means to me that our elected officials should be controlling and managing the direction of this project. We need evidence to support that the long-term benefits of this project will outweigh any negative economic and environmental impacts. Instead, what we're getting is a continuing false narrative that these 15 turbines will get us to our goal of 100% renewable. Meanwhile, there's been no meaningful studies on the effects of our land-based infrastructure or from the turbines themselves. The Climate Action Plan that was drafted in 2015, said we need to do more with solar, and we do. Thank you. Sorry, I ran out of time there.
Oh, you were short the last time, so you get a lot of points. David?
What would I do as your town councilman? I would continue working on what our energy portfolio is. Yes, we do have to look at solar. We also have to potentially look at wind that could be onshore then too. One of the things that we didn't talk about so far in the first couple of speakers is offshore energy maybe not be from this application, but it will be from other applications. So we still have to protect the individuals and the fisheries by going through mitigation plans, which the town board just recently put out for RFP this week. Has anyone been to the Southampton High School recently? If you look at the top of the Southampton High School, which is a flat roof and where my mom actually taught for a couple of years, they actually have wind turbines on the top of that roof. They actually looked into doing that at East Hampton High School years ago prior to them doing their renovation there. This is something that school systems, municipalities, individuals have to continue to look for. We have to plan for sea level rise and energy needs and demands. Let's look at solar. Let's look at wind. Let's look at all alternatives right now then too. There is not one silver bullet. There's got to be many to defeat sea level rise and fossil fuel use.
Bonnie?
Okay, a couple of things. First of all, NYSERDA as part of the 9.2 gigawatt procurement by the governor, says that all future wind projects must include fisheries mitigation and a monitoring plan for the areas in question. Deepwater is before that, so as a result, there is nothing that they will do. And as you've seen over time, even though when I've sat on the Fisheries Advisory Committee and helped write the document with the subcommittees for a fisheries monitor and mitigation plan that I've been begging the town for 3 years, nothing has happened. Okay, so what do we do about real sustainability? First of all, you have to look at it. I mean, Deepwater's not going to do it at all. The reality is the whole point of the South Fork Wind Farm was to shave peak and to increase resiliency. It does neither. The real way to possibly do it is, first of all, we've got to look at every source, including conservation, turning off light bulbs. On top of that, why is every door have it open so that the air conditioning is pouring out? The Deepwater project is 38%, based on other wind farms, 38% effective of its nameplate. That means 46 megawatts. On top of that, the power that is working when we get it will be not during peak times in the summer when we need it. Thank you.
Thank you. Sylvia?
There is no doubt that climate change is the biggest threat to marine life. The faster we move away from fossil fuels, the better our environment will be and the better for our fisheries. The goal of 100% renewable energy has always been a combination of things, including solar, community choice aggregation, building code changes, and programs to reduce consumption and to use alternatives. If we don't have the small cable, as you phrased it, from the 15 turbines, we simply won't reach that goal. Personally, I support the project, as do 70 to 80% of those who live in East Hampton. It was reported recently that there is an ocean, quote-unquote, blob where the temperature is 7 degrees Fahrenheit higher than the surrounding waters. Marine life is dying. I just want to correct something that Mr. Gruber said. There was no solar project that was put on the shelf. That company went bankrupt, and we had to wait until another company could buy the leases out, and now we have a new program online by AES producing 1.1 megawatts of energy in solar energy.
Thank you, Sylvia. The second question appears in your materials, and it deals with airport noise. It is 2022. There is no deal to reduce helicopter and jet noise, which continues to get worse, and the FAA will do nothing. So you close the East Hampton Airport and wait. Immediately, the helicopter companies put a privately owned helicopter landing barge out in nearby state waters and set up a motorboat service to ferry people from the barge to a spot on the shore in the town. They also sharply increase helicopter landings at the privately owned Montauk Airport. At the same time, one group of residents wants the airport permanently closed to end the noise, and another group wants it reopened, fearing it will hurt the local economy. All sides start lawsuits. What do you do? Peter?
I'm beginning to think that the fourth question, which we haven't seen, might be, there's a zombie apocalypse, and what are you going to do about it? There's no doubt that the airport has been a contentious issue for decades. We've gone through a whole litany of different approaches and discussions and configurations and lawsuits. And, what we've come to understand is basically East Hampton has no control over its airport, essentially, because of FAA grant assurances. And that once those grant assurances expire, we'll have an opportunity to close the airport or to force with leverage reasonable restrictions that our community supports. And by the way, the airport doesn't just affect East Hampton residents, it affects all of Long Island, particularly eastern Long Island. The North Fork recently just had a meeting in Riverhead. Dozens upon dozens of residents come all the way to East Hampton to complain. I think the path forward is really to envision what could potentially be an airport in the future with our control.
Betsy?
This question seems to speak to know more about the airport user's intention than this current board does. The fact that you spoke about a ferry service with them landing in the water, that's not totally unrealistic, because it's my understanding that there are other private areas that are on the table for the airport users should the airport close. If that does happen, if the airport closes, it's not going to keep the helicopters from coming. They'll still come. It will only serve to have them land in private areas of which East Hampton will have little or no control. Whatever side you're on this, that won't be good for any of us. Your question also speaks to all of the lawsuits pending and potentially being filed. And this board has a history of ignoring liability, especially at the airport. It's been reported recently that individuals have been encouraged to sue the town in order to provide political coverage, and we'll let that sink in for just a second. I watched a recent town board meeting and was actually horrified to hear Sylvia Overby say she was waiting to hear back from Ed Michaels on the location for runway lights and a guardrail at the airport. Are we really putting matters of airport safety in the hands of the harbor master? Has he suddenly gained experience, expertise, or education in airport safety? Why on earth would you look to that individual to sign off on this?
Betsy, I think that's enough
Okay,
time.
sorry. He doesn't even use email.
David, please.
I emailed Ed Michaels yesterday on another subject for public safety, and he got back to me immediately. With public safety, political cover does not come into conversations that we deal with. We deal on facts right now, and the fact is simply that the airport right now has too many operations for a local municipal airport. Yes, Blade is coming in, is being used for commercial entities, but the FBOs that are there are very respectable for the needs of the individuals that live in this town. Not just them, but also the town board has been really working hard right now to decrease the operations and to maintain safety at an airport. Because just like any infrastructure in the town of East Hampton, if we do not continue maintaining that infrastructure, we will be in trouble in the end. What we do have to watch out for right now, potentially if the airport does close, is where all that traffic might want to go. Betsy is correct. I agree. There are other private entities out here or locations they can go to. They're known. There's no secret. But what we have to do is make sure, can we control those? Can we control ours? Can we control the ones in Southampton? Let's look at it globally right now, because I do believe the airport's an asset and something that the town needs to either continue working to make sure they manage, but do it in a way that all the residents, not just of East Hampton Town, but of the East End Long Island, can be happy with.
Thank you, David. Bonnie?
The trickle down from the East Hampton Airport will be coming to Montauk. They already are. They're landing on Navy Road. They're landing in the water. I know I was at Wainscott CAC in which one of the gentlemen there was talking about these seaplanes as not even having the same amount of time in order to be able to have the accreditation that the normal planes do. I live right down the street from the Montauk Airport, which is private, and I don't want to see Montauk get overloaded, but I know people that live near the airport. My kids went to school at Ross, and it was like a runway during a soccer game sometimes, and I was shocked. I don't have the answers. I'd like to be able to put everybody in the room together and, see who wrangles and fights it out, but obviously we can't have that type of thing. But I think the solution is to try to get both sides to the table, or however many sides, and try to find and work through something that everyone can live with. They may not be thrilled with it, but something that allows the airport to exist in the future and also maintains the important quality of life for residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Sylvia, please.
Why would anyone want to barge for helicopters, increasing the noise pollution and fouling our waters for swimmers, kayakers, paddleboarders, boaters, etc.? 2/3 of the passengers that disembark in East Hampton do not reside here, but they go to other places on the South Fork. Any heliport, if it is to be considered at all, should be in the areas where the majority of people actually go. However, I have to say that I sympathize with those who are affected by noise and don't believe that spreading the pain is a solution to the problem. Our airport is an asset that needs to return to its roots of supporting local pilots as a general aviation airport. Recently, the FAA has reached out to East Hampton, and I view this as a positive gesture in helping us have some meaningful discussions about relief for our airport. I just want to say that Betsy Brambrick should know that Ed Michaels is our safety officer and that he does other things besides being on the water, and that there is a difference between runway lights and apron lights. And what I discussed with the town board was apron lights. Betsy might also want to consider different anyway, I'll quit right now. We'll continue.
We'll come back to you, Sophia. By the way, Well, no, I just said we'd come back to Sylvia, not that she was going to speak next. By the way, Lauren over here will pick up any questions that you have, write them down and pass up to. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I really am sorry. I'm sorry.
Pat Trunzo and I fought the FAA for 15 years to relieve the town of East Hampton of the grant assurances, and we succeeded. We got them to agree to terminate them in 2014. And then this town board blew that opportunity by insisting on retaining a lawyer with gross and obvious conflicts of interest. It was outrageous. Nonetheless, the only solution for us if we're going to keep an airport to serve our local pilots without driving everybody else crazy from noise is if we get control over it. Pat and I became aviation lawyers in the course of that 15 years, and we proposed to the town's council a means of privatizing the airport in order to achieve that now. The response to the lawyer was he didn't think that was legally possible. Pat asked him for a legal citation. Never happened. Never heard why it's not possible. We can get control of this airport if we put our minds to it, and we can save it as a community asset while relieving the community of noise. I know how to do that.
Again, I apologize, David. The next question will be started by Betsy Bambrick, and it's about reassessment. A young family working in town builds a new $800,000 house. When they get their tax bill, they are shocked to find that they are paying higher taxes than a big house in their own school district built in 1910 and which was sold last year for $8 million, 10 times the cost of their house. They sue the town to force a reassessment, which the town has never done, although required to do so periodically under New York state law. Older residents on fixed incomes are terrified that their taxes will go up. What do you do?
One thing that jumps out at me at this particular question is where you say, they sue the town to force a reassessment, which the town has never done, although required to do so periodically under New York state law. Why are we exempting ourselves from following the New York state law? The answer to that would be people don't want to do reassessment, especially when it's an election year, because they're not going to get the votes. The example you gave with the $800,000 house, I know living in Springs, I was reassessed for a house worth over $1 million. My house is not worth over $1 million. So you're forced to grieve. But I think that reassessment should happen. It's required to happen under New York state law, but there has to be sensitivity and balance for just that scenario. The older people on fixed incomes will be scared that their taxes are going to go up, so there has to be a very careful reassessment done in that regard.
Thank you. David?
Thank you. I would support the process of law. The town is being sued. We would move forward with that and let the courts allow this to adjudicate. This happened in the town of Islip in 1977. I don't necessarily think that a lawsuit is the proper venue for this couple that just had their taxes reassessed. To start right now, I think they should start in the SCAR program, which is the Small Claims Assessment Review. That's an Article 7 judicial review. They should start with there right now. As we've all discussed in the past, and I discussed at the last debate last year, typically for our town of East Hampton, which has about 24,000 parcels, there's about 2,200 grievances a year, and about 1,200 of them go to the SCAR program, that it would cost us about $4 to $5 million to reassess the town. It might not actually make too much of a big difference in our tax base from that then too. Out of that, about a third will go up, a third will go down, a third will stay the same. This is what we typically hear. I agree with Betsy right now. We have to be careful for the unknowns on there. That's why if we did go to assessment, I would want to make sure we look for some special legislation in New York state law to allow, if we did get a reassessment, for their potential incremental increases in their assessment over time to protect seniors, veterans, and the vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Bonnie?
I am that family. We lived 5 of us in 880 square feet, and we built a house that was 3 to 4 times larger. During the height of the building boom, got hit every which way to Sunday as the cost, the mortgage, you name it. And then we got, initially our taxes were, I think, about 12 grand, and then we got wailed on because of the Wilkinson administration up to 18. It would probably, but I say this possibly, help for a real assessment. However, I have friends that have hotels. I have senior citizen friends. We've watched my husband's father wind up getting the cost of his taxes or what it cost to build his house in Babylon. There's got to be a way to figure out how to do it so that we don't make the mistakes of Nassau. But I don't feel in order to keep people here that you can ignore it forever. The young people need to be able to have some relief if they built a home. The senior citizens definitely need to be protected because they won't be able to live here at all. And you don't want to destroy the capital of the business in order to be able to get them to a point where they have zero profit as a result of it. Thanks.
So as David mentioned, what we have been told is that the rule of thumb is a third, a third, a third. A third of the taxes will go up, a third will stay the same, and a third will go down. The concern is, as has already been stated, is that longtime residents, retired residents, and generational residents can ill afford an increase in their taxes. So there are mechanisms such as the grievance process, there are STAR exemptions, the SCAR program, and there's some veteran exemptions that East Hampton has. But reassessment is a frightening prospect, and there's some evidence that needs confirmation through perhaps consultants or a study that would inform us as to the type of inequities that would occur and how best to address them. But please remember that reassessment doesn't mean that the town gets more money at all. It just means that the distribution of how that money is distributed is redone, and it's going to cost us $4 to $5 million to have that reassessment program. So I think there's more information before we move forward.
Thank you, Sylvia. David, I'm not going to skip you again.
Reassessment is inevitable because the law requires it, and like so many problems in East Hampton, we've been putting our heads in the sand and pretending that somehow we can avoid the inevitable if we just don't look at it. The question is, how is it going to happen? It will happen. And it needs to happen because we have gross inequities. David Buddha recently discovered that the sand pit on Middle Highway that's now controversial because it wants to mine below the water table is paying $2,000 a year of taxes. That's just outrageous. There's a lot to be gained from reassessment, but of course we have to find the mechanism to protect people who are vulnerable because their houses may have appreciated greatly over the years, but their incomes have not risen commensurately. That can be done. We'll probably have to finance their tax increases in some way, but we can afford to do that. It's coming. We need to plan for it and stop pretending that we can avoid it.
Well, first of all, on the previous question, Mr. Gruber said that he became an aviation lawyer and that for 20 years has been fighting to gain access controls for the town of East Hampton. Frankly, his legal theory failed, and that's why he's here today, folks. And I want to say beyond that, that not only did we exhaust, appeal to the Second Circuit with the very best attorney there was, Kathleen Sullivan, but we also went all the way to the United States Supreme Court, which declined to hear our case. But going back to assessments, David mentioned the sandpit assessment. Well, it's vacant land, and vacant land that's unimproved is taxed based on vacant and unimproved. Doesn't have a house on it, doesn't have anything on it. Of course it's going to be assessed less. Are you suggesting that we should reassess vacant land and bring it up to market value, thereby forcing people who are not developing land to develop it? I think that would be a huge mistake. As far as tax assessment, I do agree with Mr. Gruber in that there are inequities currently, and it's happened over generations, and no one prior to us here now had taken that on. I've actually been in consultation with our tax assessor, looking at hiring a consultant to begin the data collection that would be necessary for a reassessment. That would be the very first step. It's going to cost about $4 million to do this over time.
Our next question is about was going to be about the apocalypse, but I think we, I think we better. I know you prepared for that one, but this one's kind of soft. David, why don't you start? And it's a very simple question. What do you think are the two biggest challenges facing the town, and what would you do to address them?
Two biggest challenges facing the town right now is to give it a home and for generations to come right now. We have to provide not just a place where individuals can come here to live, survive, and flourish, but we have to be able to give our generations that are growing up right now, going through Bonnock Tech and East Hampton High School, a place they want to come back to because it's not just beautiful, but there's a place to live and a place to succeed economically right now. We have to try to make sure we work within our character of our community to provide commerce out here. We can do that through the internet. We can do that through telecommunication and infrastructure upgrades right now. We protect our infrastructure. We protect our children. Those are two of the main things I will continuously keep saying right now. That's the first one. Second one right now is our environment. We have to protect our environment. That comes also through infrastructure right now. We protect our surface waters, our drinking waters, the reasons why we love it and cherish our hometown of East Hampton. Thank you.
I'm going to agree with David on the first part regarding where do our kids live. Affordable housing is a huge issue. It's been one since I moved here. We've basically lost an entire generation of Bonnockers because of the costs and the increase of housing. And so those that used to have year-round housing don't. That's all gone the way of Airbnb. So we've basically screwed ourselves out of that. If we don't find ways in all sorts of ways to not just in a larger home, but duplexes or making apartments legal, we're going to lose everyone. And then it's just going to be this bedroom community. Secondly, I agree on the environment. I think specifically, though, the water. Can we drink it? That's, drinking water and housing are number one and number two because of the fact that if we have issues like other places in Long Island, we may not even know what ticking time bombs we've got going, and we have to do a full court press on drinking water within the town. Before my time, yes.
Thank you.
It's going to be pretty boring here. So I would agree that and I would say it was climate change. It's one of the things that is high on the list for me. That also informs our environment, it informs our water, it informs a lot of other issues that we're having to tackle right now. So climate change would be one. I think we've been working on it with the energy sustainability. We've been working on continuing our CPF program, making sure that we buy properties now under two different conditions, one just for open space and recreation, but the other for water quality. So we've been continuing to work on the environment. Our second is affordable housing. And again, this town board in many, 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 many years has the first affordable housing project coming online. It's completed. We're now screening people to move into the 12 manor houses. That's the first one that's been built by the town itself in, I think, over a decade. We've also changed some of the legislation. I worked with David Lease on changing some so that we could have detached apartments and that we could have detached apartments on a smaller piece of property, which is what David and I worked on. We also looked at apartments for people moving into that are 62 years old and then can rent their house as well. So we are working on affordable housing in a variety of ways, and that's what we're going to have to do to solve the problem.
David?
The comprehensive plan adopted by the town of East Hampton 15 years ago said that we need 1,300 units of affordable housing for young people who grow up here and can't afford to stay, for working families, and for seniors who retire here after spending their working lives here and want to stay with friends and family. In the first 9 years after we adopted that plan, we were building it at the rate of 10 per year, which is still far too low, possibly to get to the goal of 1,300. But in the next 6 years, when this town board majority took over, we only built 20. That's the rate of 3 a year. Even with the 37 that they're building now in Amagansett, that's only going to come up to 7 a year. It's going to take hundreds of years to solve this problem the way this is being done. We need to solve it by building housing densely so it's affordable. Otherwise, we're going to see the local community long gone by the time this problem is solved.
Peter?
Well, I think Mr. Gruber's plan was to take 80 acres and build 3-story apartments. That's what he's talked about. in solving our problem. And, you know, frankly, if you build more and more affordable housing the way that he anticipates solving that problem, you basically destroy the character of our town. I think it's much more important to take an approach to try and keep the existing neighborhoods that we have, the existing housing, at an affordable rate. You know, we've worked with Assemblyman Fred Thiel. The state legislature has recently passed a bill that would allow a 0.5% transfer tax, similar to the CPF, to create a funding source. We should be subsidizing the buying of homes in traditional affordable neighborhoods and protecting our town from complete gentrification and McMansions. Let's keep the existing neighborhoods intact. Let's not go clearing 80 acres and building 3-story, bust our zoning and put 3-story apartments everywhere. We know that bringing you know, affordable housing, people in lower incomes all together in big projects doesn't work. It's been seen in New York City. It just doesn't work that way.
Well, you said it was a soft question, but actually what we're hearing is two major problems: affordable housing and water quality. So I'm not going to belabor it and say the same things that everyone else already said. I'm just going to veer off on a little bit of a tangent on both of those issues. With affordable housing, you know, we definitely need to keep our young working families here because we are not able to feed into our fire districts, our volunteerism, and those departments are drying up and fading away. I also currently work with St. Michael's Senior Housing. I'm an advocate for the seniors, for affordable housing for seniors, and I believe we need to have a St. Michael's type project in every hamlet. It's been very successful. It's been in operation for 6 years. It's the model for what senior affordable housing should be. Water quality, you know, we should have townwide testing. We rely on the county right now, and we frankly just are not moving fast enough when we do find problems with our water, and I think we need to stop dragging our heels and take more action on our vision statements and our comprehensive plan.
Thank you, Betsy. The next question started. He did. The next question deals with cell phone towers. In our 2013 debate, all candidates supported building needed towers to overcome life-threatening gaps in our telecommunications system and encourage new business. Virtually nothing has been done because everyone is afraid of, quote, ugly towers. How would you get 5 new towers built in the next 2 years? Honey?
Not quite so soft, is it? Well, let's see. I think the issue in Springs, having been on the fire department, the issue in Springs is an emergency. Somebody's going to die, and then everyone's going to stare at their shoes and say, oh, yeah, we fixed it. Or we'll fix it now, and that should never happen to anyone. You dial 911, you want somebody there as soon as possible to take care of the issue. I know in Montauk we've had really crap cell service since forever, and I live next to, well, we do, and I live next to where the fire department is apparently putting in at the Gator site 2 new towers for cell phone service. My concern there is that the 2 sets of nesting osprey that live there are going to be able to come back in the future, and I've discussed that with the county because it's a county issue at this point. I think for the other cell phone towers that exist, some of them, it depends because, you know, the fire department, they get sometimes free equipment in exchange for putting a tower up in certain areas. So you'd have to basically have all the chiefs in, go through all the territory, find out what sites are available, and then find out every town, every chief knows where the problems are. So you've got to get them in first, have that discussion, and then find from there where it can be done.
Thank you, Bonnie. Sylvia?
I'm going to say this is in 2 parts, more or less. One, I think you're asking the questions about just cell phones in general around the town. And I do think it's important. More people are getting off of their landlines. And so the cell phones become their only communication for anybody else, including emergencies. So the planning board has been looking. I think they've got several applications already for new cell towers. We're also looking at other sites for the emergency services. So originally we had planned emergency services in the new towers and upgrading the emergency system. Over the last, it hasn't been done, and we're now at the point where it needs to be done, and we've been working on it, and we've expanded that. So instead of doing the 3 towers, we're doing 5 towers. We're looking at other locations where we can make sure that emergencies are met with new equipment and upgraded equipment, and that cell towers will be looked at through the planning department process, which is where it belongs.
Thank you. David?
4 years ago, the town of East Hampton prevented the Springs Fire District from using its newly built emergency communications tower. 4 years have gone by. 1 year ago, the Springs Fire Chiefs and Commissioners came to the Springs CAC to say this is a life-threatening situation. Somebody's going to lose their life because we go to fires, they said, and we can't communicate with each other. Mr. Van Scoyac, a few days ago in front of Newsday, accused me of fear-mongering, but those are the words of the Springs Fire Chiefs and Commissioners, not mine. Maybe he wants to accuse them of fear-mongering. We need to declare an emergency and allow that tower to be used until the town can solve this problem. They said it was going to be solved last spring, then they said it was going to be solved last month. Now they say it's going to be solved next spring. We really can't wait for them to solve the problem. In the meantime, they bought millions of dollars of communications equipment. It's sitting in the boxes it came in because they never engineered the system to figure out whether they could use the equipment on the towers we have, and then they discovered that we can't.
Peter?
I'll start with Springs. Springs was never part of the emergency communications system. We committed 2 years ago to make it part of that system. 4 years ago, the Springs Fire Department got really bad legal advice and decided that they could erect a cellular tower to get revenue on that site. And then they got even worse advice to sue the town instead of just going through the planning board process, a process that the community demands. In terms of locations, we have gotten the Gator site secured after 20 years and 4 other administrations trying to get that done. It was my administration that allowed us to get those communications and dead spots in Montauk. I'm very proud of that. In addition to that, Northwest will get a new cell tower and emergency communications at the new Northwest Fire substation. In addition to that, we've upgraded all the existing sites. We purchased the equipment years ago when we first signed the contract with Motorola 2 years ago, and it's been stored. It's probably saved us over $100,000 rather than buying it now. The prices go up. Those sites that David talks about not being engineered, they were never designed for emergency communications in Springs. That's why they had to change the tower to 180 feet instead of 150. It wasn't able to hold that equipment. Sorry, I didn't see the stop sign.
Thank you, Peter. Betsy?
I'm finding it hard to understand why Springs was not on that original list, being one of the densest hamlets. And I know that the Springs community, if not the densest, the Springs community feels like the ugly stepchild when it comes to this town board and when it comes to emergency communications. I don't know how you don't consider Springs to begin with. But the fact that years and years and years pass without this being solved just shows me that it's not a priority for this board or for the last administration. The chiefs have been coming and begging for relief. It is an emergency at this point. And for me, it's just unconscionable that even our police radios have dead zones. You know, with this day and age and people going in for public safety and enforcement, they can't be alone out there. And it's not just a matter of cell towers and cell service, it's a matter of emergency communications, which I think should be prioritized at this point.
Thank you, Betsy. David?
Simply put, emergency communications is the top priority for this town board right now. It is a $12 million project that the town's been working on, and we need to complete this. I live in Springs. I do not believe Springs is the stepchild to this. Springs is in dire need for this, and other locations also. Luckily, as the supervisor mentioned, there is a new cell phone tower going to Northwest to help their communications there or their cell service. I was actually on the Zoning Board of Appeals for the last cell phone facility that was installed. Where was it? The Montauk Point Lighthouse. You don't see it there. You can do cell phone towers that work within the character neighborhood. Wainscott, where is one? Home Sweet Home Pagoda. There are areas you can do that. They don't always have to look like a tower. Let's think about alternatives. Small cell technology right now. Fill in the dead spots. The FCC knows where those dead spots are. So do the lawyers. You find them, you find alternatives. Let's use that. Let's just not think a monopole that has towers and whips and antennas is going to be the solution, because in 10 to 20 years from now, we probably will not have cell phone service. We have to go on to the next technology.
Thank you, David. The next question will begin with Sylvia, and it's about the aquaculture project. The town is considering an 8,000 square foot aquaculture nursery and hatchery facility on Gann Road, for which some state money is reportedly available to consolidate the nursery now on Gann Road and the hatchery in Montauk. What is your view on this project and the procedures for its planning? Is this an appropriate spot? Is it a residential lot?
Yes, it is a residential lot. We'll start with that. It was purchased by CPF, and the purpose of the purchase was stated in the resolution that it would be used for the hatchery, because that piece of property happens to be right next to the existing hatchery. So we would like to combine those two and make sure that we have a facility that is on 3 Mile Harbor, and it is the preferred place to grow out the seeds that we have, the oysters and the clams, instead of the building that we're using right now in Montauk, which is, I think, left over from World War II Navy. And instead of using that building and transporting them to the 3 Mile Harbor site, then they would go ahead and use that 3 Mile Harbor site for growing them out. And that in that instance, it would stop any die-off that happens between the small little seeds that they get in Montauk and taking them then into the hatchery that's at 3 Mile Harbor, where the waters are more conducive, where the waters also need to be clean too.
Thank you, Sylvia. David?
This is just about the silliest project ever proposed. We have a functioning shellfish hatchery. It produces a surplus of clam and oyster seeds, more than we're able to grow out and use. It does it in half of its available space. There is absolutely no need for a new one. And the savings projected from building the new one are $23,000 a year. So the proposal is to spend $5 million plus to save $23,000 a year. That's less than 0.5%. Nobody in their right mind would do this with their own money. The job of the officials of the town is not only to be good stewards of our funds, but to be as good stewards or better than they would with their own money. And here we are blowing $1.5 million of essential CPF money that we need for real water quality improvement on something that will do nothing for water quality, because it will not put one additional single clam, oyster, or scallop into our waters. An utter waste of money.
Thank you, David. Peter?
I completely disagree with Mr. Gruber and his characterization. Surprise. Yeah, we have a, sorry, please no applause. You can just vote for me later. We own a 9,700 square foot building in Montauk that was given to the town. It's a former Navy building. The existing hatchery takes its water from basically oceanic waters. It's not really, it immediately was known 20 years ago, it was not a great site, but it was a site we had to get started. So we've since have the nursery site at Commercial Dock in Gann Road. It's commercial dock next to a commercial marina, a commercial restaurant, and yes, there are residences behind it. But I think supporting aquaculture and supporting the culture and our history of fisheries here, not to mention boistering and restoring habitat, is incredibly important. We'll have 9,700 square feet of commercial industrial space to rent out, so I think it's going to be a little more than $23,000 that this will have an impact on.
Thank you, Peter. Betsy?
It's undeniable that there's widespread support of shellfish aquaculture. Whether or not it belongs there is the question for me. I think in its original plan to have the hatchery there, that's great, but it has morphed into this enormous project with this huge meeting place where there's no parking in a residential area without any kind of review, because apparently we've exempted ourselves from going through any kind of environmental review. And I think it's dangerous when the town board does not follow the zoning code. Anyone else who wanted to put a project of this scope and breadth in that area would be denied. And they're really not paying attention to the citizens, the residents there, and the other businesses that are there, in that it's going to impact the neighborhood in a very negative way. I say, go with the shellfish hatchery, get rid of that grandiose plan for the huge meeting facility.
Thank you, Betsy. David?
I probably know about this facility, this plan, better than anyone here at the board right now, and this is a project that I have spearheaded. It is not a grandiose plan. It is actually a plan that shows good government right now. We are trying to consolidate our aquaculture department right now to where actually oceanic currents do not participate, and we do it in an area right now where it's greater influence of the better waters to get a better outcome. The facility right now is just a little over 4,000 square feet with a 1,500 square foot attached garage right now. It is a residential area, yes, a residential property, but through a special use permit, yes, a resident would be able to put a public meeting space or mariculture on this property. I applied and it was awarded a $400,000 grant from the Empire State Development Grant for the design of this facility for potential construction. We have not got the construction funds yet. We have applied for that. We have done environmental assessment forms, and we will continue to get recommendations from the planning board as we move forward right now. This project is trying to benefit the whole entire town of East Hampton from Wainscott to 2000 Montauk Highway, which is Montauk Point Lighthouse. A shellfish will filter 50 gallons a day, and over the course of a year, that could be close to 26 trillion gallons of water quality improvements from a shellfish hatchery.
Thank you, David. Bonnie?
I look at this a little bit differently. I'm on the Natural Resources Committee for the Long Island Regional Economic Development Council, and I know for any of the projects that we've had to do, we've had to go through a specific process. I don't feel that process has been adhered to because it looks like it's the latest darling is aquaculture. And aquaculture by itself to help the baymen is one thing. Aquaculture is a different kind of side business for those that really have no business being in the water anyway, but are deciding to benefit from creating their own business. I'm not sure that that's the place to do it. I would rather see the process that Jeff Bragman talked about, who's the environmental attorney on the town board, where it goes through the entire planning board process. I don't know if that facility, I know the one in Montauk has been ignored forever. I know the LWRP as it relates to commercial fishing issues, which aquaculture and baymen harvesting clams and oysters is a big deal, has been ignored forever. I hate to see a facility that already exists be ignored completely and just shelved to be put on sale as opposed to starting with what you have and working up for that. And also I'm concerned about how it's going to affect those that work on the commercial docks on the Gann Road facility.
Thank you, Bonnie. The next question deals with senior services. As our population is aging, we have a dilapidated senior center and lack a full range of senior services. What can be done in the next 2 years? David?
Well, a lot can be done if we get on about doing it. 4 years, we can't get emergency communications going. 15 years, we can barely build any affordable housing. A new senior center has been on the table for years now, no progress. But we've got an unnecessary shellfish hatchery designed and ready to go in a year. That just shows you what the priorities are in this town. Can we build a senior center? I don't see why not. But we have to sit down and involve the community in planning a senior center, because time after time, this board does things without consulting the people in this community who know. They never asked the business committee whether it made sense to design a new shellfish hatchery. They just plunk things down. We can do this. It's not that difficult, but we have to get on about doing it. If it sits on the shelf while we're taking care of oysters, it will never be done.
Thank you, David. Peter?
Well, again, I disagree with the characterization here. The town actually does have a full range of senior services, senior nutrition, both in Montauk and East Hampton. And one of the concerns that we have in building a new senior center is that we want to be able to continue to offer all those programs while we build a new senior center. Now, on the existing site, we've run into some issues where a recreation area is being claimed to be a park, and therefore it would require parks alienation in order to do that. That's a process that will take probably over a year. We've continued to look at some other sites. As soon as we get to that process, through that process, we certainly will bring it to the town people and to have it fully vetted. And we do go through site plan review and get comments from site plan on all projects the town does. And as far as involving the public, we have over 30 citizen committees have over 300 people with all sorts of expertise within their fields. David mentioned the business committee, that's just one. And again, you know, we agree that the current structure, the paint's peeling, we need to expand because we have a growing senior population. So that is a priority for us.
Thank you, Peter. Betsy?
Working with seniors every day, I'm faced with a lot of these issues and a lot of these problems. And when we speak to these boards and the amount of people that are on them, it's the same group of people on every board. We need a different voice. We need other people coming to the table and saying what their experiences are, what their concerns are. What I'm hearing is we need to start looking at maybe an assisted living facility so that people can stay in their communities, stay in their homes, stay around their family if they have any left, and be comfortable. And so that we don't have to pick up and drive to Riverhead to visit an ailing elderly loved one. Again, I think St. Michael's was a great project, but when it comes to senior services, again, we've had vision and things sit on the table for years and we don't really get anything done. We need to move forward on it. The CDCH building would be a great place to start.
Thank you, Betsy. David?
I fully support the need, the desire in moving forward with a new senior citizen center. The one that currently there used to be an old bar, and you go to certain areas of it, you actually step through the floor of it then too. It's not what our seniors deserve, and we as a town board have to move forward. I agree with that. I support that wholly, and I will continue to look for other locations or work on solutions on the locations we have now. We were very close to moving forward with that, but unfortunately, we could not get there because of some design elements and some legal elements, but the board is consistently working for that, and we actually talked about that even this week within some of the council people and myself. I do agree with Betsy. The senior center is one thing, but senior health care is even more important right now. As my parents get older right now, and I saw it with my grandmother then too, not just senior aid, but also dementia care, okay? Health care is very, very important. I think we can actually try to build a facility and maybe we parlay that into a senior assistant center. But as we've heard here before, land is expensive and we need to find it, appropriate land right now. Not land that is in the far reaches of the town, but potentially land that is more centralized also. And we will continue to do that.
My mom was in a nursing home for 12 years before she died a couple of years ago. She was in West Hampton Beach, but the issues regarding medical care for seniors are outrageous in this town. People are trapped on transportation buses for 2, 3, 4 hours, 5 hours. That shouldn't be. We're one of the, I think, richest communities out here. We should try to figure out a better way to do it. I think we should be doing that with local church groups, fire departments, you name it, working on. I don't know about assisted living, but I'm more than willing to listen to anybody and try to figure out how to make it happen. I know there's requirements for ADA, which makes specific sizes and rooms necessary. So let's work with every business owner, builder, and county and state facility to try to figure out a way to make it done. There's 30% senior citizens in Montauk alone, about half of them snowbird. I don't know what the number is for East Hampton directly, but every single one of them deserve better than what they're getting.
So I agree that the senior building needs to be redone, and we are working on it. We did hit a roadblock, as Peter Van Scoyac said. That roadblock is not a simple fix, and so we had to look far afield to see if there was another place where we could put the senior center. Certainly, it was worked on from over a couple of years ago. We had a plan for it, and then we hit the roadblock, which is sad for everyone on the town board and everyone in the community that uses the senior services, which are well used, and the programs have been expanded over the years. We now have a wellness program that we also use Ashwa Hall for the wellness program, teaching seniors senior yoga and other types of Qigong, I think is the type, is what they use. But I want to go back to affordable housing. One of the things that we did with affordable housing when we did the legislation for apartments within a house is that you could build onto your house an apartment, and a senior could live in the apartment and then rent the house. This helps seniors age in place. It is a good compromise when they want to downsize in some way, but they still want to either have their children around them and they can come to the house, or they can rent the house for, to help them, again, stay in the community through rental income.
Peter, I guess you start. And this is the rental registry. What plans do you have to better enforce the rental registry? What? Oh, I'm sorry. Sure. Sure. You scared me there. What plans do you have to better enforce the rental registry?
Well, as you know, before we had the rental registry, we really had very little means of enforcing short-term rentals, which we've seen really erode the neighborhood's character. It's created a lot more traffic out here. It means that fewer people are coming full week or even full month. They're coming out weekends. They're overflowing the roadways and restaurants. We, expanded enforcement by actually hiring more staff, by having real-time communications between complaints that come in, by installing laptops, having that internet access to each enforcement officer. But we have a constitution in the United States that puts up certain prohibitions about how you go about collecting data, that you have to prove a case, there's due process. I really believe that ultimately the best way to solve this problem is to work directly by addressing the entities that create the short-term business, which is Airbnb, HomeAway, VRBO, and to really force them to show us when people are renting more than 2 times in a 6-month period for less than 2 weeks.
Okay, so I was the director of code enforcement when the rental registry law was drafted and enacted, and I can tell you that it was proposed to be the magic bullet for short-term rental enforcement. And it is a farce because it does nothing towards handling short-term enforcement. That law is already on the books, and just having a registry does absolutely nothing towards getting enforcement personnel into those houses and checking for violations. Because there's a self-checklist that people who want to get on the rental registry, they say, yeah, we're not violating any laws, here you go, here's your $200, we're good for 2 years. The fact that we are still talking about the rental registry as being some kind of magic bullet for code enforcement, I can go on for past my 10 seconds on the flaws in code enforcement right now because it's completely mismanaged and the Public Safety Division needs a complete overhaul.
I don't see the rental registry as a magic bullet. I see it as a tool in the belt right now for use for code enforcement. I think we do have a very great code enforcement staff right now. They've learned on the fly. Yes, would we like to increase their ranks? Definitely. Or can we just continue to make the ones that we have even better, which they are very good. One thing, another tool in the belt is, as Peter was talking about, short-term rentals right now are all over the internet. They change maybe not on just a weekly but a daily basis right now. We can't employ our staff right now to constantly just keep looking at the internet right now. What I would actually like to look at is actually using technology to our aid or outsource the need and desire to go and look at different agencies, Airbnb, vacation rental by owner, right now to see where these perpetrators of our current code right now are, and to see if we can go out there directly and adjudicate it right now. We just can't rely on aggrieved and bereaved neighbors right now to contact us. We have to go out there and be very proactive. I think we have to outsource certain sections of our code enforcement to allow our men and women in code enforcement to do their job appropriately.
Well, I'm not going to really speak toward the enforcement part when Betsy obviously lived and breathed it, but I do believe that the key to making the rental registry or how to enforce it, better enforce it, is enforcement. And like anything else, you have laws on the books, but they're not being enforced. So if it means we have to double the staff or triple the staff in order to make it something so that all of us can live in an appropriate manner in our town, then I'm saying let's go for it. At the same time, I don't know specifically regarding the law, because I think to have, Peter said 2 times in 6 weeks, Montauk used to be like that. People would rent by the month. Families came out. You'd have to at least rent by a week. Now it's a free-for-all. And does it go after VRBO? I think that's highly doubtful. So do we take a really good look at the law and figure out ways if locals want to be able to rent their house? Because if somebody can pay off their mortgage by renting their house for a month, good on you. But at the same time, who rents and how people are treated that live here matter. So I would say enforcement is the key. Thank you.
Yeah, behavior, it's hard sometimes when people misbehave. Always legislate behavior. So I know that Airbnb, Verbo, the things we've been talking about, certainly changes the face of a neighborhood. It changes also the community character. And those are the things that we work really hard to maintain. So the rental registry has done us a good service. I think it put up some roadblocks that were necessary at the time. Like anything, you start to see flaws within some of the things that you put together. Every rental has to have a registry number. If we could force Airbnb to also have to publish that registry number, it would help the community. And it would help our law enforcement agencies, so they're not just looking at a screen trying to figure out where that address is and is where that house is located. So if we could get other tools, and other communities are using new legislation that are forcing places, companies like Airbnb to give them more information. Massachusetts just passed a law. Boston just passed in Massachusetts, obviously, that law. So, you know, those are the tools that we can start to look at and use in our own community. Boston's not a resort community, but we'll tailor it so it works for us.
Well, anybody who's observed the traffic in the last couple of summers, especially this summer, knows that short-term rentals are now rampant at East Hampton. We didn't suddenly get several thousand more housing units in town, but there are many, many more people here. I live off 114, and it backs up for half a mile to a mile at times. I want to agree with Supervisor Van Scoyac that we need to hold the companies that are engaged in the short-term rentals accountable for this. However, I'd like to call to his attention that he and Councilwoman Overby are incumbents, and I don't know what's been stopping them from doing this all along. Councilwoman Overby was quoted in the East Hampton Star saying that enforcing the town code is a matter of political will, particularly with regards to illegal rentals, except she said that in 2013.
Okay. I think there's a great question here for Betsy. It's a simple word. It's called deer. Deer management plans have not produced meaningful results. What would you do to jumpstart reducing the deer herds?
Okay, I am an animal lover. I'll put that out there first and foremost. But I do not have any opposition to our local tradition of hunting. I was on, not on the deer management committee, but I went to a meeting many years ago when we talked about the 4-poster program to, you know, so that they can put their heads in, get the feed, and take care of the tick situation. As someone who's had Lyme's twice and also has the alpha-gal meat allergy, I can tell you that, you know, controlling the deer population is probably something we are way behind on solving that problem. So I think we need to look at all kinds of methods for thinning the herd, and then keeping track of what's happening once we have thinned that herd out a little bit. But I think we need to go with the 4-poster system right away.
David?
Later tonight, I'll be heading to Shelter Island, going to the Mishomic Preserve, which is part of the Nature Conservancy. It's about 2,200 acres, run by Jeremy Sambleson. Over there, we took the Nature Preserve committee members and part of the Deer Management Committee for a tour there, and I thank him for that. Over there, they had been very successful at controlling their deer herd on that 2,200 acre property by looking at multiple layers of control. Yes, lethal, they actually harvest many deer out of there. They also use the 4-poster, but they also take a scientific approach to it, where they have deer exclosures. I've been looking to try to get deer exclosures within the town of East Hampton now for the last year and a half. They give a scientific approach to see about deer browse. Deer browse is not just affecting our understory where other species live, but it also could be affecting our aquaculture, our aquaphilia right now because of the loss of leaf matter right now. There's no one secret to this. We have to look at multiple layers. I do respect the tradition of hunting. I also do respect the individuals like the walk their dogs on the trails. We have to make sure we look at it. But here's the thing right now. 4-posters are great, but they also have to watch the chemicals and the feed and the other animals that can actually increase because of the use of that feed too. But we should always go look at over at Mashonack Preserve. It's a wonderful location.
I read up some of the information from the CDC on the 4-poster method. What they said was on a county level it may not work, but in small applications like what David mentioned, the Shelter Island, they've been doing it for 7 years. They've got, I guess, 31 sites. The pros of that is that it seems to work. The cons of that is other animals feed there and there's bacteria and the risk of disease can be spread. I don't have a problem with the cull as long as that food is then utilized for food banks through the area. It drives me nuts if you actually harvest them but then have no place to be able to butcher them legally. I think that needs to be looked at. And let's see if I forgot anything else here. I do feel that the present thing of just waiting for something to happen isn't the case. As Betsy said, my husband's got alpha-gal too, so I know it's a serious situation. I think that the town should start doing something and then work appropriately from there. Thanks.
Sylvia?
Yep. First, I just want to correct something that Mr. Gruber had said earlier. When he quoted me correctly, that it's political will to have enforcement in 2013. I said that. But that's when Bill Wilkinson was the supervisor of the town. So, you know, we got to make sure that we get our story straight here, David. So back to deer. And my time might expire. I agree with Betsy that the 4-poster also affects other animals and other populations. Other animal populations should be used sparingly, although it is effective for the deer. So it's a choice that we have to make if that's where we want to go. I also want to say I respect hunting as a rural activity, and I want our community to stay as rural as possible for as long as possible. And in that, if it's hunting, I'm not a hunter. I don't think I ever will be a hunter. I don't see the need, but yeah, no. And but I do understand that it's not an activity that I would support personally, but I understand that it's an activity that should take place in a place like East Hampton.
David?
Well, I just have to remind Councilwoman Overby that she's been in the majority since 2013, so that the political will involved is hers. As for the deer, I think that we can afford to experiment aggressively with 4-posters where deer are exposed to either or both of some anti-tick medication or contraceptives. And we should do that. We should do it aggressively, and we should experiment and see whether it has the effect that we want, as well as be prepared to monitor whether there are effects on other animals. If that is unsuccessful, or it turns out to have problems that we find unacceptable, then I'm perfectly willing to see a culling of this herd. I've had Lyme disease 5 times, and I don't walk in the woods, and I don't garden. I don't even know how I managed to get it 5 times. So this is a real problem. We know deer are among the vectors, although there are others, and I think we have to get the deer population under control. They're a threat to human health and safety.
I think deer have a place in our community, but they've kind of exceeded really the capacity of the land to really have them here. We've eliminated all their natural predators. The primary predator of deer right now is the automobile. Last year, we had 646 confirmed carcasses along our town roadways. Just the year, I think just the year before, it was in the 400s. It's something like a 35% increase. It certainly is a human health concern. They certainly are a host for ticks, and therefore help increase the population of ticks. I challenge any of you here to go on any of our town preserved land and find a sapling of a deciduous tree that is less than an inch in diameter. You will be hard pressed to find any. I think it's an issue that we've continued to expand hunting, throughout the town on town preserved land. And I think at some point we may actually be forced to have a call in order to put things back in balance.
This is really our last question, because we'd like to limit our debate to 90 minutes. Town manager. David, we've talked about this for a long time, a town manager or town administrator, and if you are for it, how soon would you do it, and what is a realistic budget for the position and the support? Do you think there'll be offsetting efficiency savings?
Right before the budget. Can you just repeat?
Oh, sure. Let me repeat the question.
Yes, I got that.
Yeah. Do you support moving to a town manager or town administrator? And if so, how soon would you do it? And what is a realistic budget for this position and its support staff? Do you think there would be offsetting efficiency savings?
That way currently right now. Sorry. I don't know if we need to currently move that way right now. I do know what's happening in the current budget right now. We are looking to actually put other staff members into positions right now where they will actually look and take care of other capital projects. My big fear right now is the town capital project right now. You take on a capital project, you make sure you do not want to spend taxpayer money on debt service right now. If you start a project, finish it. But here's the thing. The projects do not just come out of the blue. The projects that we take on as a town come from a council person or the supervisor themselves. So I think the best manager of the town right now are the people that you elect. If you come up with a project right now and you're a town council person, you should be managing and finishing that project. Yes, you can. We still are a small town right now. Even though we have an $81 million budget, we can take care of the projects and finish them correctly as a town council person. So right now, currently, I would steer away from that, maybe a clerk of the works or an individual placement of a person that would just look over capital projects.
Well, I had the same question a couple of weeks ago at one of the other debates. I'm not really in the for or against camp, but I don't understand why the town groupings of different departments don't already have some type of person that is checking and dotting the I's and crossing the T's as to how much something costs and being able to go back to their budget and question what's going on. I think before we put in for another outlay of resources, I think, and to hire someone, I think there should be an internal look. If after time and you decide that that isn't really doing the job, then maybe see what other towns of this size have done and how well it's worked out overall before adding to the budget.
So we'll probably have this question again by the League of Women Voters, because it seems to be something that the League of Women Voters asks every single time I've ever been in a debate with them. So I look forward to answering it for the League of Women Voters on the 16th. Yes, thank you guys.
A plug.
That's a plug. So I am not against having a town manager. I think a town manager gives continuity, and I like the concept, particularly when you see that council people change.
Well, having been there and done it, as well as been educated in management, I can tell you that management is actually a professional discipline. It's not something you're born knowing how to do. David, in his answer, really let the cat out of the bag when he described town board members managing things. Town board members are not elected to be managers. They're elected to be legislators. And the chance that they actually have the expertise to be competent managers, it would be almost a fluke. Imagine if you had a school with no principal, and the school board and the head of the school board are directly trying to run the school. Chaos. The reason that we have fantasy solutions to our real problems is that we don't have professional management at the top of our government, and we need it. Our board members should be legislators setting policy, and we should have professionals running the government.
Well, I just want to point out that we do have professionals directing and managing, and David apparently doesn't know what the department head jobs are, and I think he's pretty much alienated most of the town staff at this point in the election process. So I don't know how I'll be able to work with them, frankly. You know, I think there's policy and there's executive management, and the supervisor is the executive manager for the town with his staff. The policy is also derived from the town board, and it's currently divided up amongst liaisons to specific departments to act between the policy and the actual management. So the job of the you know, council people is not to manage. It's really just to work with the department heads who are managing to ensure that the policy is being developed and actually you know, put into play.
Well, as a former department head in the town of East Hampton, I can tell you that the managers are not always free to manage because of influence from town board members. I also want to say that when Sylvia says that we had two very good de facto managers in Alex Walters and in Joanne Pilgrim, I just want to remind everyone that Joanne Pilgrim is really just issuing press releases for the supervisor, and Alex Walter was just a gatekeeper to keep people out of Larry Cantwell's office. So I'm not opposed to a town manager. I think that that's an important position, but I think we're going to need to be very, very careful with who we put in that position, that it's not just another political patronage position given to a crony or a friend of a friend.
Thank you all. And I think each of you should take a minute now and sum up your own qualifications, your own thoughts. Sylvia, since you went last the last time, you can go first this time. And I know you're surprised, but that's the head for the second part.
Okay, how's that? Better? Okay. So one of the things I didn't say at the very beginning was that I have been your council person for the last 8 years. I was 7 years on the planning board. 4 of those years were as chair, and I also chaired the Amagansett CAC for 5 years. My husband and I raised our 2 boys here. They graduated from the Amagansett Middle School and the East Hampton High School. I'm also very proud to announce that I've received the endorsement of the Long Island Environmental Voters Forum. They said in part, quote, "We know that we can count on you to support both a healthy environment and a healthy economy," end quote. I am passionate about preserving our environment and our history. I am committed to protecting our quality of life, and I understand that our economy is dependent on it. Personally, I have been granted a gift. It's the gift to serve a community, the community that I love, and the people that make it extraordinary. With your vote on November 5th, I will continue to protect, defend, and lead this unique community to a future of maintaining its beauty, its natural resources, and its economy. Thank you for this honor, and I ask you for your vote on November the 5th.
Bonnie? Or before.
I don't have anything prepared, so I'll just throw it out there, and I hope you all appreciate it. Whether I've been on the fire department jumping in at the scene, or when I was in the Peace Corps speaking a foreign language in a bush post in Cameroon as a health co-coordinator of primary health care, or pretty much within the Fishery Management Council learning about every one of these different fisheries and how it responds to habitat, benthic habitat, et cetera. I may not have known everything that I needed to when I first started, but I jumped in and I did everything I could to have mastery of the subject. I don't have all the answers for the town board. I promise everyone here, however, that if you do elect me, I will do everything in my power to work my heart out for every single one of the citizens of East Hampton, not just those that are in favor this week or next week, but all of you together. Thank you.
Again, I want to thank the GGG for having us here, and also to our fellow competitors for being here, and to you. Most importantly, I want to look at the camera. I want to thank my wife and children for allowing me to be here right now. In the past 21 years as your town, sorry, 21 years. In the past 21 months as your town councilman, I've worked successfully on numerous infrastructure projects within the town of East Hampton. These include the Amagansett bus stop and also re-roofing the Marine Museum. I've instituted legislation successfully to increase affordable housing opportunities and the removal of double utility poles that we see all around the town of East Hampton due to infrastructure upgrades from PSE&G. I have helped secure funding for the second phase of the second house restoration in Montauk, and also increased beach parking, safety, and capacity at Ditch Plains Beach. I have a lifetime of experience living and working in my community, and I have demonstrated the ability to bring people together to get things done and solve problems. I have protected public beach access as a founding member of Citizens for Access Rights. I have been a founding member of Paddlers for Humanity and fundraised and brought awareness through recreation to the needs of youth programming initiatives. I have chaired the restoration of the Amagansett Life Saving Station, and I have now put together a private-public partnership that produced a structure that's recently listed to the National Historical Register. And lastly, I've been a 5-year member of the Zoning Board of Appeals and protected the cornerstone of East Hampton's government, its town code. I thank everyone for coming here. I humbly ask and I appreciate your vote last year in the special election, and I ask for your vote this year in this coming election too.
Thank you. Betsy?
That almost did feel like 21 years there when we went over time just a little bit. But again, I also want to thank everyone for holding this. I'm so appreciative. I'm so blessed and lucky to be here today to be able to speak to you about the issues. Springs has been my home since the mid-'70s. I'm a local who has raised a family here. My greatest accomplishments being my 2 now adult children who inspire me to strive for greatness. I have witnessed firsthand the erosion of trust in our elected officials, and I offer a voice outside of the monopoly of power that currently exists. I want everyone to keep in mind that with 30+ years of public service, I have institutional knowledge inside Town Hall that is unparalleled. I have the intelligence, integrity, empathy, and experience to bring us back to the basics of good government that we all deserve. As a leader for Team East Hampton, no one will work harder for you. And please vote for me, Betsy Bambrick, on November 5th or before during early voting. Thank you so much.
Or by absentee ballot.
First of all, I want to thank all the candidates. Anyone who would step up and try to serve their community in this capacity, I think, should be applauded. I have 19 years of relevant government experience right here in East Hampton. I have a multitude of relationships that expand throughout the town citizenry, town government employees, and multiple layers of government. And I strive every day to do my very best to ensure that our community has the protections of its environment, has the social responsibility and economic success, as well as efficient use of our tax dollars, and that we have efficient and effective government. I believe my record over those 19 years speaks for itself. Please look through the brochure, some of the things that we've done recently. It's a long list. The list gets much longer than that. That's all they could put on 2 pages in the brochure. You know, again, I'm so fortunate to live here in East Hampton. I owe so much to this community. It's been a wonderful place to live. And I think protecting our history, our diversity, and our environment are key. And I hope that you'll vote for me so I can continue in that work.
I've been involved in public life for more than 20 years. And I'm running now because it just breaks my heart that the same things that we were talking about and saying we were going to do 20 years ago, we're still talking about and saying we're going to do now. I think we're at a crossroads. I think if you look at any problem that we have, whether it's affordable housing, declining water quality, emergency communications, response to beach erosion, renewable energy, and you ask yourself, what's happened in the last 6 years during which the majority on the board has been the majority, the honest answer is very little or nothing. To me, that's tragic, and that's why it breaks my heart. If we are going to move forward in this community, we have to accept that we need to start looking at realistic solutions to our problems. We need to do it together as a community. We can't do it by fiat from a town board that imposes its solutions on neighborhoods. And if we do this together, I think we could look at the next 6 years and see that we've accomplished a great deal. That's what I want to do, and that's why I'm asking for your vote on November 5th or before. Thank you.
I want to thank all the candidates and all the audience.